Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about two new uniques that were just teased by GGG. On the one hand, we finally have a unique for grenade skills only called Redemption, which is technically a crossbow. And then we also have Nightfall, which is one of the new shields that gives you kind of this shield throw-esque skill. And we know most of the numbers, but let's talk about what this might mean in practice. Now, before we go into the Redemption unique, which is a cannon, new base type, I want to talk about that base type before anything else, because while this unique might be good, might not be good, has some interesting applications, the thing I'm hyped for the most is the base type that gets introduced in the game. Mark says in the video that this is going to be a new base type to use mostly for grenades because you cannot load or fire ammunition. That means no actual crossbow skills, only stuff like grenades. It also comes with 0 critical hit chance and only 1.4 attacks per second, a level requirement of 65 from what Mark said in the video. I'm assuming it's going to be endgame only, so you're not going to get different base types, and you can't start using it during the campaign, at least from the wording he said. It also does have quite high physical damage, though. Compared to the current grenade endgame bow, which is a siege base, it does have significantly more physical damage, but it does not come with crit chance, and it has significantly less attack speed, which is still quite relevant, and it loses the additional projectile. So on first glance, you might say it doesn't look that interesting, but Mark does say that there are going to be grenade-specific mods. And if we think about what is usually on these kind of items in the mod pool, most likely there's going to be a suffix that gives you 2 additional projectiles, similar to what bows do. At least I would assume that, and then maybe like grenades have increased damage or whatever. But you're going to get some of that power back that you're going to lose on the base type. So you might say, oh, there's not too much upside. You're just going to use that other crossbow, so please move on to the unique. But I want to throw in one more thing that a lot of people missed here is, if you cannot load or fire ammunition, what happens to your auto attack? The answer is you have a different auto attack, a grenade auto attack. So to the astute observer, people thought, why is he able to spam the same grenade over and over to get the stacks for the redemption? You can see it up here. He's just spamming grenades. The answer is there is actually an auto attack, and you can see it right here. Now, why do I know that? Is because once it gets pressed, there is a cooldown, and it is way too low for any grenade that currently exists. And also, once again, there has to be an auto attack because you literally cannot fire your normal auto attack that a crossbow would usually have. Now, why do I open with this? It's because I think this is actually more hype than the unique itself. Don't get me wrong, the unique is really cool, but a grenade auto attack, I don't think you understand how cool that actually is. So if we look at what the grenade auto attack actually looks like, he throws it right here, and you can see it. You can see the light shadow in the background of when he attacks. You can see he has the charge here, and it's going to be basically immediate. So the cooldown seems to be something like 0.3 seconds. So look at this. And then we can look at how the auto attack actually looks quite decent for clear. So basically instant recovery, extremely, extremely fast. Now let's look at the explosion. That is not a bad explosion at all for something that is an auto attack. It costs no mana. It seems to have decent, good, clear potential. Imagine this with like a Herald or with some AoE scaling. To be fair, we don't really know what is on this character that is showcased, but it's also, for a League starter, a 3/6 link at level 90. And once again, I want to go back to the mana thing, especially because we know that Leech is getting reworked. And while a lot of people are talking about, well, that could be bad for Life Leech, it could also be really bad for Mana Leech that a lot of people rely on. And it's just something you can spam while your other skills are out, while your cooldowns are out. And it means that we can actually scale attack speed, and yeah, that's just another multiplier that we can have access to. So in general, this is one of the reasons why this video made me more hyped for a grenade auto attack than anything else. And there have been auto attacks in the past that have been good, for example, the Wyvern. So I don't see why it would not be viable. Being able to completely forego stuff like mana cost or having to get a 6 link early on just sounds like a very nice thing, if only for League Start. It also scales with additional projectiles, as you can see right here, and it will shotgun. So we'll have to see until we know the exact number of the auto attack, how good it's going to be. But like I said, being able to spam a grenade skill is going to be big for Redemption. Now, looking at Redemption, we can see that it is the base type we just talked about, a charge run cannon, and then cannot load or fire ammunition. It does have a high physical damage, but do remember that there's no flat roll here. So in terms of physical damage, the comparison could be drawn to something akin to 200 Divines right now, which is definitely quite strong. We'll have to see how rare this cannon actually is, and you can see it's pretty similar. Now, do note that the attacks per second is significantly lower because of the base type, and there's also no chance for an attack speed roll here. Then it has a reduced cooldown recovery rate, which in general is a global mod, so it could be bad for some skills. For a grenade skill, it is bad, but you do get a ton of grenade CDR. And this is not less CDR, it is reduced. So you can definitely make up for it. Still a downside for sure though. And then you have explosive rhythm and explosive fervor. Now I want you to look in the top left right here. You can see a counter. This is the explosive rhythm stack. Now in the release, we see him gain a stack every single time he attacks. But here it says every 2 times you use a grenade skill. So maybe if you have 2 projectiles, it counts as 2 grenade skills. Probably not. This is maybe an outdated version of this, or they thought it was too strong and they nerfed it to 2 times. But yeah, technically you can see him whenever he attacks, he's getting a stack. So there's a little bit of a bait where it might look better in the footage than it actually is, or vice versa. We don't know. But that's just one little thing I caught. And then remove all explosive rhythm on reaching 10 to gain explosive fervor for 10 seconds. As far as I know, these stacks don't do anything until you get to 10. And then you can see at 10 stacks, it converts to a 10-second duration buff. What is that buff, you say? Well, it is right here, and I broke it down right here. So 15% attack speed per different grenade skill you used recently. So it wants you to use multiple grenade skills, but you can actually use the attack speed because you're now able to spam, because grenades do not have a cooldown anymore. However, they will still have a mana cost, and I want to make that clear because that is a factor here, especially since we don't know what's going to happen to Leech, but it is a factor. +1 projectile, quite strong, but it mostly just makes up for not being able to use a siege crossbow, which already has +1 projectile. And then it has instant exploding, which is obviously huge for quality of life and clear. Now, they do show some gameplay and also put down mortar cannons, and it seems like they inherit the buff as well, which would make sense. So the mortar cannon just shoots away, which is, yeah, basically the totem where you can put on a grenade skill and it just keeps shooting, but it does not give you stacks because it is not technically you, so you still have to gain the stacks yourself. And they also show this gameplay on the boss right here. Once you get the buff, you can just spam away, as you can see right here. So these are explosive grenades or auto attacks, I'm not really sure, but auto attacks just seem to have a little bit less of an AoE. Otherwise, they look pretty similar to explosive. Now, is this crossbow actually viable? You don't necessarily need crit on a grenade build. In fact, a lot of good grenade builds do not need it. It is a lot of opportunity cost. It's not the best spot to be on the tree for crit. Crossbows don't have that much support. So while it's obviously a downside, it is definitely mitigatable. The fact that you only have 1.4 attacks per second is a little bit of a hindrance, but yeah, reduced CDR. You don't have +2 levels. Once again, if we compare it to an actual end game crossbow, and I am assuming here that this is a rare crossbow, like a really rare one that drops from a boss and it's hard to get, then the comparison falls a little bit short, I would say. But what this might be good for is to spam your grenades to kind of pre-throw on a boss. We don't know if the buff sustains on weapon swap, which I don't think it will. But even if it doesn't, just being able to spam your grenades might be absolutely crazy. For me personally, I'm thinking about the playstyle, having to use different grenades. You don't technically need to, but that's the only way to get the attack speed. I'm not a 100% sold on this. I think it looks cute, definitely fun, and there's going to be some fun builds around it. For me, though, this base type and just the fact that we get an auto attack grenade skill is absolutely huge. And I'm really just interested to see what the numbers are on that auto attack. But so that's just me personally, but I think it's a really cool and well-designed unique that might have some use cases. Now let's talk about the second unique here, and that is the shield you see on the screen right now. This is Nightfall. First up, it has decent block chance, decent armor. Now, this is a little bit weird because we see it without quality. So with quality and then with extra rune sockets, this will probably go up to around 1,200, 1,300 armor, I would assume, which is important because the Soaring Midnight, which this shield revolves around, scales off of the armor off of your shield. So it's not going to be as bad, especially if you use other skills like, for example, Shield Wall. Otherwise, it has a pretty tough strength requirement. But looking at the skill here, which is the real payoff. So I'm first obviously going to show you the skill. So he first throws out this projectile and then presses it again, and it explodes in an AoE, and it obviously looks great. And it's also a movement skill, so a built-in movement skill, kind of reminiscent of Pounce here. Now, if we look at the skill itself, we have Soaring Midnight. Now, the damage looks pretty low, but just so you know, this is the projectile, which is not supposed to be the big damage dealer. As for the AoE, we do not right now know how much damage it will deal because it's in this other tab. So we're just going to have to work with the assumption that it's going to be around 500-ish plus damage as your payoff. So it has conversion only 50%, but I'm assuming the explosion will have more. That's usually how these payoff skills work. Modifies the number of proj applies to pierce, but it innately has 3 pierce, so you probably don't have to really get much else. And it has more added physical damage than, for example, Shield Wall to compensate for having to use a shield that is not as good as you would usually have in Endgame. If you look at some of the more cracked shields currently on trade, you can get 1,500 upwards. Like the best shields possible are obviously ridiculous, but 1,400, 1,500 is something you can deal with in trade. So you have to use a shield that only has 1,200 to 1,300. This kind of compensates for that. Projectiles return to you, returning projectiles all pierce. And just to show you this again, the projectile itself flies out and then comes back. But if you activate it again while it's flying out, then you do this explosion. And we can see right here that it can also aftershock. Not 100% sure what that's from. Maybe that is part of the skill, or it's just some effect that they have from, I don't know, Titan or from the tree or wherever. Now, important to know, if you catch the projectile, which does not mean exploding it, it means just getting it back the normal way. So I think he's doing it somewhere here. He's just going to throw out the projectile and just return it to him. The cooldown resets and he can do it again. But otherwise, it goes on a 4-second cooldown. That includes the explosion, I'm assuming. And in the text, you can see right here, you can circumvent that by destroying an ice crystal with the Embrace the Fall. This means that if you just want to jump around on the screen, you might have to find a way to activate Frost Wall somehow, and then they get exploded on fall. This only works on the fall. If it hits an ice crystal and explodes it, you get the cooldown reset, and you could technically just jump around the screen. The other thing is they have just introduced a new unique called Eventide Petals, which I just want to shout out for the fact that it has 50 light radius. If you've never played with light radius, especially if you skip too much of the Temple League, you will not know how crazy this mod actually is. It makes you see way more things on a minimap. It's basically a different game at that point, so that's a really cool stat. It has a little bit of int, a little bit of crit, and then ice crystals have 2% increased maximum life for 5% cold res you have, which is fine if you want to scale the ice crystals, but if you don't, you can also just use it to create ice crystals to maybe reset the cooldown. And it does generate Arctic Petals on both killing an enemy with crit hits and then also critically hitting rare unique targets. How that's going to play out in reality is pretty much impossible to know at this point. What we can say from this is if it deals decent damage, it is a 4-second cooldown movement skill. So whatever you think about its damage, this could find its way into an offhand on some build. It does have a little bit of an attack time, so you can't as swiftly move. But as we've seen with these kind of effects before, if you can even decently reset it, like something like Pounce, it is still going to be a viable skill. The shield does not look too bad. So at worst, I think it's a decent offhand option, and at best, it is absolutely cracked. So with that all being said, if I had to choose between the two uniques, I would give it to the shield by a little bit. Just thinking that it has more practical use cases where you can actually jump around the screen. You already have Shield Wall, which might or might not get nerfed, but if shield skills are fine, you can also just play a Shield Wall build where you incorporate this potentially. And when it comes to the Crossbow skill, I'm more hyped about the base type and the thought of having an auto attack for grenade skills. But as with all more complex uniques, we'll have to actually try it out, see how it feels in game to actually say more about it. I'm pretty stoked here. This is the first day basically because they just came back from weekend where they have posted anything, and we're already getting 2 uniques that are very unique. And yeah, I mean, if this is gonna keep going for the next 3 weeks, I'm super stoked. But with that being said, since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.